Awesome. Glad to have you all back. Well, since you're all still with me thus far, congratulations. Your brain apparently hasn't been turned into scrambled eggs. At least not yet. So you're willing to join me on the journey to part 3. Now, hopefully by now, you may have even had an aha moment or two of your own. I'll just settle the fact you're still listening to me and leave it at that. Now, if you're at all familiar with the teachings of the Bible, you should know that it should not be followed to the letter. Because, as I mentioned earlier, it has been adapted countless times to fit the secret society's narrative. At any rate, you might wonder why I mentioned Esau, much less Cain. Well, as far as Cain goes, I think we have pretty much painted that picture for you, if it hadn't been already, his being the son of Lucifer and all. Now, as for Esau, he and Jacob were twin sons born to Rebekah and Isaac, but not before a tumultuous pregnancy where she felt like they were constantly battling each other in the womb. If you recall the story at all, Rebekah was seemingly unable to have children until Yah blessed her with the gift at Isaac's request. Now we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 25, verse 23, where it says, "And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger." Now, if you're at all acquainted with the story of Esau and Jacob, you know that Esau, being the firstborn and obviously oblivious to the fact that there was money to be had from being the firstborn, sold his birthright to Jacob for a measly bowl of red item pottage, which are lentil beans, simply because the birthright meant absolutely nothing to Esau. In fact, he despised it. It was more along the lines of the value of a handshake to him. But that wasn't true for Jacob, so he was willing to deceive to get it. Moreover, Yahweh despised Esau because he was determined to go on his own way and do his own thing. Not to mention that he already knew what was to transpire, and that is exactly what happened. Now, Genesis chapter 26, verses 34 and 35, it explains how he committed his own seed line to the eternal ruins, becoming sons of perdition, even as Judas, who betrayed Yahushua, was. In addition to giving his birthright away, he disappointed his parents further by taking a Hittite woman as his wife at the age of 40. Esau married into the cursed Cain race, corrupting his holy seed by going the way of the wicked. The Hittites were descendants of Heth, and Heth was one of the sons of Canaan, a cursed seed. Canaan was the son of Ham, and father of all Canaanites, including the Hittites. These people were cursed seeds because of what Ham had done with his Canaanite mixed seed mother shortly after the flood. And this is yet another biblical cover-up, as Ham committed incest with his mother during Noah's inebriated, passed-out state. Now, if you read Leviticus chapters 18 and 20, and pay special attention to chapter 18, verses 6 through 8, and chapter 20, verses 11 and 17. Now, consequently, Noah didn't curse Ham, but instead cursed his son, Canaan, which would include all of his offspring. Incidentally, the Hittites, having had already started worshiping Satan, were the power brokers in the known world, as is the case today, controlling most of the economy, economics, money, and merchandising corporation, and were a very powerful influence. Now, Genesis chapter 9, verses 22, 24, and 25, you can read about that. Now, by now I can imagine that you're probably thinking, I just explained that nobody should follow the Bible to the letter. That writings of man, being religion, should never replace your relationship with your Heavenly Father, Yah. Yes, and I stand by that statement unequivocally. That does not mean, though, you can't use your before-mentioned Yah-giving instincts, discernment, to determine what to believe and what to take with that notorious grain of salt. After all, it isn't the best-selling book of all time for nothing. It had to include truths in order for us to adhere to it for over 1,500 years, right? Trust me, Lucifer isn't stupid. He didn't want a mass awakening happening too soon simply because the Bible became unbelievable to the point where people compared it to, say, some children's fairy tales. You just have to consider two things when you're reading passages, in my opinion. Is it unabashedly selfish or undeniably selfless? Now, where was I? Oh, right. Back to the battle of Jacob and Esau. Okay, because Jacob managed to trick Esau into giving up his birthright for a bowl of stew by using some cunning deception, Esau hated him. And his hate for him only grew that much more when their mother Rebekah convinced Jacob to pretend to be Esau when their father Isaac requested that Esau hunt and cook what could potentially be his last meal as he was really, really ill and close to death. And that's in Genesis 27. Now, considering Esau was quite hairy compared to Jacob, Rebekah convinced Jacob to get 2 of his best kids from his herd of goats, while she gathered some of Esau's clothes for him to wear, and she would not only prepare Esau's meal, she would also provide Jacob with the kid's skin in order to deceive a practically blind Isaac by wrapping them around his hands and neck to appear as hairy as Esau. And it worked. Jacob was able to convince his deathly ill father that he was Esau. So Jacob received the older brother's blessing, as you can read in Genesis 27, verse 27 and 29. Now, once Esau came back with his prepared meal, consequently, and that being the real Esau, Isaac was more than just a little confused. So he told his eldest son that he had been tricked by his brother Jacob and had already given him his blessing. Esau then begs his father for a blessing too, considering it was taken from him. Thus his father proceeds to bless him as well, but not in the same fashion. His blessing included that he should serve his younger brother, just as Yah explained to Rebekah during her pregnancy, if you recall. What's more, Isaac tells him that you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now that translates to Esau should break free when he couldn't take it anymore, for it is what you authorize in your life that will continue, and it is what you tolerate that will hound you. This is also explained in Isaiah chapter 10, verse 27. Anyway, once he was done grieving over his father's death, Esau was unwavering in his decision to kill Jacob. Jacob had used trickery on 2 different occasions to obtain what was rightfully Esau's. That is more than likely why Esau married Hittite women. His lust for power and wealth was overpowering. That seed, incidentally, is the same way today. They control the money around the entire world. They are called Edomites because of Edom, the color red, which is what the bowl of pottage was, not to mention that Esau was also very red, and hairy. And to this day, it is still their mission to kill Jacob, as Esau never succeeded in killing his younger brother. Twin brother, I might add. So the war continues today in the seed of Esau. The Edomites seek to get rid of Jacob's offspring, which are primarily modern-day Christians and believers of Yahweh. Jacob's descendants became known as Israelites, where the original 14 tribes of Israel had originated, if you recall hearing that in the Bible. Now the seed of Jacob is both the house of Judah and the house of Israel. Those 14 tribes, we being America, are part of Israel. A lot of people don't realize that, but it was spread, all the tribes were spread around the country. Now don't go off into this British Israelism theory because it was flawed and serves the purpose of the Illuminati, who are trying to claim that the British throne goes through King David, when it's been sabotaged over the years, especially now that the only ones on the throne there are imposters. Now Esau's descendants, well, they became known as Reds, which is also seen as the symbolic color of communism. All of the isms were created by the serpent seed, such as Satanism, socialism, Nazism, humanism, liberalism, etc. And these are the backbone of the first beast of Revelation 13, which is the same scarlet-colored beast mentioned in Revelation 17 with 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, if you also notice the prophecy that Isaac gave Esau, that he would live by the sword and take dominion over the earth, is what we read in Revelations chapter 13, verse 10. And that being, the first beast lives by the sword, will take dominion of the earth, and will die by the sword. Now, the same exact seed line, the same seed line that is all but omitted from the Bible entirely. It is the New World Order and Zionism that carries the serpent seed line today. It is ruled in the background by the Illuminati families of the serpent seed lines. It is Satan's master plan to bring the entire world under a global government through the New World Order so he can rule. And the evil one's seed will make war against the Lamb's seed, and that being the believers and Israelites and Judaites. These shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn with her fire. And that's in Revelation 17. Now, today, the world banking Edomite and Hittite, Canaanite, counterfeit Jews of Revelations chapter 2, verse 9, under Satan's rule, control the world's economy and preparing the world for a global government and the rise of their master, Satan, as the Antichrist. Now, additionally, we are fervently directed by our churches that we must support Israel, or the Lord will bring his judgment on this nation. Well, in actuality, it is the fact that we are supporting them that is bringing his judgment on this nation. Now, don't you think it's the least bit peculiar that every president we've had over the, say, last 50 plus years has essentially said the same thing in way of always supporting our close ally without question? They just hope nobody questions it, and it's worked pretty good so far. Now, case in point, you heard undying support for Israel if you tuned into last year's unprecedented presidential debates and even in the preceding primaries. Israel today is the prophecy of evil figs of Jeremiah chapters 21 through 24, and the evil fig tree that Yahweh cursed. He wasn't cursing his own people, but those he hates, the serpent seedlines of Esau and Cain. And consequently, if the Edomites, it's pronounced both ways, but if the Edomites are the ones inhabiting Israel today, and the ones who call themselves Jews, but are not, then who are the real Jews? Where are they now? Well, they're scattered across the world. Are you ready for this? America, which a lot of people think is Mystery Babylon of Revelation, and I have to agree, is Israel. We are the 14 tribes of Israel scattered all over this country, along with the other white nations. The Jews of old were not dark-skinned people. Noah was apparently platinum blonde with blue eyes. David was ruddy with red hair, similar to Esau. Ruddy meaning he had flushed cheeks with the ability to blush. And dark-skinned people cannot visibly blush, neither are they born with blonde or red hair. It was Noah's cursed seed line's grandson, Canaan, from Ham, who was the father of the dark-skinned race. Even the Arab race of today, with Sheba and Dedan, were linked to Ham through his son. Now, if you look at much of the scattered tribes of Israel today, they include Germany, France, Britain, America, and others, the predominant white races of the world. America itself contains a mixture of all the tribes of Israel, and many of us are linked to one of the sons in particular, and that is Manasseh. Manasseh, I've heard that pronounced both ways too. Manasseh is the spelling, either way. Now, Manasseh, who has dominated bloodlines in America among the other 13 tribes of Israel, some believe this to be true because of how many Mormon LDS members are located in this part of the world, as explained in the provided link, friendsofsabbath.org. The Lord Yah of the tribe stated the tribes of Israel in Ezekiel chapter 12, verse 15. I shall scatter them among the nations and disperse them in the countries. In the book of Ezekiel alone, has states 7 times that Israel was dispersed amongst the countries or through the countries. Jeremiah tells us that in the last days that Yah will gather them out of all the countries. In Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 37, the New Living Translation, Yah says, I will certainly bring my people back again from all the countries where I will scatter them in my fury. I will bring them back to this very city and let them live in peace and safety. Now, if you read Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 12 through 14 and 23, the Jews are not in the land of Israel today. They will not be regathered into the land and will not be until the Lord returns. So the whole facade of Israel returning to their land in the last days is not true, apparently. When the Lord returns, he will regather his people from the ends of the earth to the land of Israel, and not until then. So who are the ones there now? Well, they're imposters. Remember Revelations chapter 2, verse 9? Most are mistakenly waiting for a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem before the tribulation can even occur. What they don't understand, though, is that we are under Yah's new covenant made with man, and we are his temple. And the actual abomination of desolation would be Satan putting his name or number, image, in Yahweh's temple, our bodies. Now, Sherry Schreiner has written an article on this, and I've included that link in the description as well, about the abomination of desolation. Let me ask you this. Would you really continue supporting wolves if your eyes were open to the whole truth? Would you continue to support Israel if you realized that the Israel of today was the synagogue of Satan, and that we were warned of this in Revelation chapter 2, verse 9? Now, would you support ministries if you knew that over 43,000 pastors and ministers from every denomination was an initiated Mason into Freemasonry? Well, of course your answer to all those questions is an unequivocal no. And that is precisely why they don't want you to know. The churches are the main supporters of establishing the New World Order in Israel. Let me repeat that. The churches are the main supporters of establishing the New World Order in Israel. And unbeknownst to them, their own persecution under the Antichrist and his one-world dictatorship. Now, Satan couldn't do it without them. Their support funds his rise to power, enabling his seed line to instigate the wars and conditioning necessary for him to arrive. Alas, almost 99% of the megachurch pastors are Masons. 99% are Masons. You believe that? And many of you are unknowingly supporting them. These megachurches of today are some of Satan's biggest accomplishments. Satan's, not Yahweh's. The doctrines they teach lead you away from Yah, not to him. Now, if you're celebrating Christmas trees in the shape of what else? Triangles, a la pyramids, on December 25th, bunny eggs on Easter, and celebrating the Sabbath on Sunday, then you are a pagan, probably unknowingly, but a pagan all the same. Now, either way, you are not a follower of Yah's, even if you disagree. Trust me, before my awakening, I was right there with you, simply going along with tradition. Taught by whom? My parents, just like you. Well, through your own parents, not mine, but I think you get the point. Consequently, now, I'm not left without a pretty viable excuse or even a pathetic excuse, which are basically the same thing if you think about it. Because as the Bible explains about ignorant sin and fully aware sin, there's not a huge difference. Well, depending on who you hear it from, which we'll delve into a little bit later. Regardless, in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 26 through 28, it reads, If we go on sinning after we have learned the truth, no sacrifice can take away our sins. All that is left is a terrifying wait for judgment and a raging fire that will consume God's enemies. If 2 or 3 witnesses accused of someone of rejecting Moses' teachings, That person was shown no mercy as he was executed. And in John chapter 13, verses 13 through 17, Yahushua says, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightfully so, for that is who I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." And if you could read between the lines of washing his feet, you can understand. Basically, that pretty matched what the first passage I read from Hebrews was, when it's basically stating that once you know what you're doing, and there's no going back. I mean, if in my awakening, basically, if I decided to go ahead and continue to celebrate Christmas on the 25th, why would I do that? I know now that I shouldn't have been the whole time, so there's no point to continue doing that. But anyway, I digress. And that's just the easiest place to start. Now, some of you are fulfilled with demonic doctrines and beliefs that you hideously defend, while claiming you love the Father, Yah. Now, I'll explain the misconstrued traditions, including those of man, but check this out. Sherry's article regarding where the churches went wrong, and you can read it in full. But before we do, let's explain what paganism really is. As explained in the provided American Humanist.org link, pagan comes from the Latin word paganus, which refers to those who lived in the country. Now, when Christianity began to grow in the Roman Empire, it did so at first primarily in the cities. Now, these people who lived in the country and who continued to believe in the old ways came to be known as pagans. Pagans have been broadly defined as anyone involved in any religious acts, practices, or ceremony which is not Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. Also use the term to refer to anyone outside their religion. Some define paganism as a religion outside of Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, and Buddhism. Others simply define it as being without a religion. Paganism, conversely, often is not identified as a traditional religion per se, because it does not have any official doctrine. However, it has some common characteristics within its variety of traditions. Now, one of the most common beliefs is the divine presence in nature and the reverence for the natural order in life. In the strictest sense, paganism refers to the authentic religions of ancient Greece and Rome and the surrounding areas. The pagans usually had a polytheistic belief in many gods, but only one, which represents the chief god and supreme godhead it chose to worship. Get all that? Great. So the Renaissance of the 1500s reintroduced the ancient Greek concept of paganism. Now, pagan symbols and traditions entered European art, music, literature, and ethics. The Reformation of the 1600s, though, put a temporary halt to pagan thinking. Greek and Roman classics, with their focus on paganism, were accepted again during the Enlightenment of the 1700s. Paganism, interestingly enough, experienced another rise in the 1800s and 1900s when modern forms of Buddhism and Hinduism were growing in popularity. So, after all that, who was the chief god, supreme godhead anyway? Well, have you ever heard of Mithra, the sun god? No? Well, not at all familiar with this fellow, huh? But you gladly use the sun without blinking an eye, don't you? Typical. I kid because I care. All right. How's the saying go again? If you're not laughing, you're crying. Well, that's what I'm doing right there because sarcasm oozes. Okay, allow me to explain anyway. Mithra appealed to, well, most everybody, and at one time was a dominant god followed by almost every race and nation throughout the history of mankind, utilizing many different names such as Buddha, Horus, Krishna, Odin, Quetzalcoatl, Baal, that's Baal, Ra, the sun god, Bel, Marduk, Apollo, and about 15 others. Originating from Persia, he was both god and goddess as a bigender god, both male and female. Now, did you know almost all of these gods who carried Mithra dogma have their birthdays on December 25th? The birthday of the sun, and that's S-U-N. Even today's Christians know, quote-unquote, Jesus' real birthday isn't in December, yet for the sake of the church tradition, they go along with it anyway. Huh? Why? Good question. Anyway, Mithraism was established as far back as the early years after Adam and Eve had left the Garden of Eden among the pagan nations. In fact, the bull motif later adopted. Now you should know that Mithra is depicted as standing on the bull in the process of slitting its throat. Anyway, the later adopted bull motif is a reflection of the age of Taurus around 4500 and 2300 BCE. Now, the sacred bull motif is found in numerous places around the known world, precisely during the age of the Tarsus. Have you ever been to Wall Street in Manhattan, New York? If you have, you've seen the big bull in front, haven't you? Anyway, now the changes between the age of Taurus and Aries is recorded even in the Bible at Exodus 12, where Moses institutes the sacrifice of the lamb or ram instead of the bull. Mithra's slaying of the bull was an act that became as central to Mithraism as was our Savior's crucifixion to Christianity. Let me repeat that one more time. Mithra's slaying of the bull was an act that became as central to Mithraism as was our Savior's crucifixion to Christianity. I don't know how you compare the two, but apparently they did. Okay, so the bull represented rebirth and fertility, with his blood corresponding to the wine of the mysteries. The sacrifice of the bull was reenacted in the Mithraic baptism, a mystery rite in which the initiates were splattered with the blood. Now, the initiates was then said to have been born again, quote unquote. In Mithraism, the slaying of the heavenly bull, Mithra, is essentially sacrificing himself in order to save the world. The bull appears to signify the earth or mankind, and the implication is that Mithra, like Christ, as in Yahushua, overcame the world. But in the early Persian writings, Mithra himself is the bull, the god thus sacrificing himself, becoming a close mimicry, or mockery, if you would, of the real messianic sacrifice to come in, which Yah's son would fulfill to redeem mankind. That was a mouthful, huh? Alrighty. So, like the vast majority of the ancient gods, Mithra was never a real person. You understand that? Mithra was never a real person. In actuality, he was originally represented by non-human forms. And it is very significant to note that ancient Iranians themselves did not represent the sun god in human form in the earliest times. They used to represent him by means of symbols. Now, in one of the sepulchres of Darius near Naki Shwastam, Mithra is represented as a round disc, a la UFO. Next stage was at the human bust of Sun in later Mithraism. Today, we see Mithraic symbols more commonly known as Masonic or Illuminati symbols, such as the all-seeing eye, or references to the sun god. Now, additionally, like early Christianity, Mithraism was an abstinent anti-female religion. Its priesthood consisted of celibate men only. Women were forbidden to enter Mithraic temples. The women of Mithraic families had nothing to do with the men's cult, but attended services of the Great Mother in their own temples of Isis, Diana, or Juno. Anahita was the mother of Waters, traditional spouse of the solar god, whom she bore, loved, and swallowed up. And she was identified with the Anatolian great goddess Ma, and Mithra was naturally coupled with her as her opposite, a spirit of fire, light, and the sun. Her element of water overwhelmed the world in the primordial flood when one man built an ark and saved himself together with his cattle according to Mithraic myth. Now what began in water would end in fire, according to the Mithraic astrology. The great battle between the forces of light and darkness in the last days would destroy the earth with its upheaval and burnings. Virtuous ones who followed the teachings of Mithraic priesthood would join the spirit of light, Allah Illuminati, and be saved. Sinful ones who followed other teachings would be cast into hell with Ahriman and the fallen angels. Where others fall short believing Christianity mimicked and copied Mithraism, they cannot see that it was Mithraism itself that was created to mimic and copy the coming Messiah and church. But even worse, what happened was that Christianity would then incorporate Mithraic paganism, perverting the true faith indefinitely. You hear that? I'm going to repeat that paragraph one more time. Where others fall short believing Christianity mimicked and copied Mithraism, they cannot see that it was Mithraism itself that was created to mimic and copy the coming Messiah and church. But even worse, what happened was that Christianity would then incorporate Mithraic paganisms, perverting the true faith indefinitely. Led by whom, though? That's a good question. And this concludes part 3, so I really hope you're not going to end on a cliffhanger, but rather I have piqued your curiosity enough to proceed to part 4. But if not, I appreciate you listening thus far, and Yah bless.